Hello and good morning to you, my beautiful internet apprentice. I'm Morgan Donner, and today I wanted to talk to you about my next medieval gown. I'm really interested in recreating some of the garments found at the Norse encampment found in Greenland, Herjolfsnes. I do this every time. Okay, Herjolfsnes. Herjolfsnes? And these gowns, these garments were so interesting and cool because several of them are found in one big grave site and all dating from like the late 1300s, early 1400s. And it's just so darn cool that all of these extant garments were found in the early 1920s, I believe. And at the time it was just kind of the biggest thing ever, and there's one in particular that I've always thought was really cool, in part because it's got an interesting level of complexity that some of the plain rectangular construction gowns from a little bit earlier, or not really earlier, there's some that are contemporary to the exact same time, whatever. The simpler rectangular construction versus these slightly more complex shapes that are shown with the hip gores. It's very cool. I've seen other reenactors make it and I'm super jealous every time because I really want one. Now's the time. I'm gonna make one. Why wait? So that's what I'm gonna show you today. So pretty much 100% of my research for this project is going to be coming from Medieval Garments Reconstructed, which is a book specifically about that Norse find in Greenland, and I am really excited. It's been a really fun book to read because it has not only tons of information about the fabric and the threads and the seam treatments and so on that were used for these garments, but also it has patterns for all of them. Well, a representative number of them. So my big mission for today is to go ahead and transfer the pattern from its small book form into large, life-size, usable for actual sewing and cutting size, my size, and show you guys how I do that. Now, I have already done this before with the Patterns of Fashion 5 book for the stays. I showed you how to enlarge it by taking a picture of the pattern, uploading it to your computer, digitally enlarging it and printing it and taping all the papers together, which is really great for a project like that where you have a number of smaller pieces and it's a little bit more important with something like a corset or stays to be relatively exact in your proportions and sizes, at least to start out. But for something like this where it's a little bit, one, the pieces are huge, so I don't really want to print that out, and two, it's simple enough in the shape that I can go ahead and just draft it out onto my paper myself, and I think it'll be fine. So all of the patterns provided by this book are graded in sizes small, medium, and large, of which the smallest size corresponds to the actual museum measurements. This small size is a little too small for me, but the medium is actually pretty darn perfect and matches my measurements really nicely. So I'm going to, as much as possible, try to remain true to this pattern and copy it as it is seen here. So my first big hurdle has already come up, which is that I've done this expanding patterns thing tons of times before, but it's always been inches to inches. And my lovely reference point here is unfortunately in centimeters, which is fine. I have no problem working with centimeters, but my pattern paper is in inches. So I'm gonna have to think about what I want to do with that. So after a little bit of math and pondering on, I decided that while I could go ahead and times each millimeter measurement in the book by 0.2 to get the approximate correct inch measurement for my paper, I don't really want to sit here and calculate out every single measurement I do. So I think it would be far simpler if there's math I can do in my head. Like for example, if you take the millimeter measurement, divide it by 2, you'll actually get the correct centimeter measurement. And since I'm gonna have to measure out everything anyways, this will be the fastest way for me to go ahead and get the measurements from the book down onto my paper, I think. We'll see. You know, a funny thing about this project is that I was really intending for it to be the next part of the #basic garb series that I wanted to do, but there is just something so enticing about those really interesting hip gore shapes that I couldn't resist. I thought that this would be a really good opportunity to do another completely rectangular construction garment, but what can I say? Sometimes the call of the interesting is just too much to avoid. Alright, hello again from the next day. So I don't know what I was fussing about with worrying about these centimeters to inches to whatever. It's fine. If you don't think of this as 1-inch paper and you just think of it as graph paper that has really helpful, you know, up and down guidelines to use, then the actual measurements between the different lines doesn't really matter, because you're going to be making your new lines anyway when you're connecting point A to point B. So it'll be fine. Let me go ahead and show you kind of a demonstration piece so that you can get an idea of how I'm doing the scaling. Let's start out with a nice simple shape like this sleeve gusset up here. So if you want to double check that you're going to have enough room on your piece of paper, which I'm going to do so I don't accidentally run off the edge of my pattern paper here, I'm going to count the pattern squares on the paper here. They're in groups of 5, so I can count. Okay, 5, 10, 15, 20. All right, great. Going from here over, yes, I totally have enough room for 20 centimeters in this little spot here without any danger of running off my paper, which is great. I'm gonna pick this as my starting point, that way I stay on camera for you guys. These flat sides like this are really great because I can just follow the guidelines on my pattern paper and I don't have to draw my own straight lines for parts like this. Now curved lines like this are a little bit trickier because I can't just simply measure straight upward. I need to see where this spot is in relation both to the distance from the first line I've drawn and how far down it is from our very first starting point. So what I'm going to do is count my little centimeter squares down, looks like 1, 2, 3 squares down, and then I count over, looks like that's going to be 14 squares up. So 3 down, 14 over. And here's where, again, that grid paper really comes in handy. Even though it isn't actually measured in centimeters, I can still use these lines as a guideline to make sure that I am measuring at good right angles and not accidentally veering off into weird angles. And now from this new point that I've just made, I can do a good straight line down to the second point that I had made. Alright, and here comes the fun eyeballing part of this. I don't have any French curves or bendy type rulers, but you know, I can do a gentle curve and I think it'll be close enough. And yet again, more slices of pizza in my videos. So we want not only the shape of the pattern, but also the notation that the book has very helpfully provided. So for example, up here we have corner P with corner P. These two parts are eventually going to be sewn together and connected in the final garment, as well as, let's see, corner Q and I guess side Q over here. These are also going to be connected. So transferring these helpful marks to your actual pattern piece is really helpful. And of course, don't forget to put the grain line and the names of each of the pattern pieces. Even though this is the only relatively small triangle in this whole set of patterns, it's still good to have a name for everything, because when you come back to a pattern a year later, it's really, really helpful to have these names attached. Alright, so I have now done several different pieces and filled up one whole table's worth of pattern paper here. I've gotten the front gore, the two side front gores that are here, the sleeve, that's it. What I have left is to do the side back gores, the sleeve and the center back. So I'll go ahead and scooch my paper down and do the whole second batch, and then maybe let's see about showing you how I'm doing some of the more complex shapes in translating from book to paper. So we already did this really nice and simple sleeve gusset just a moment ago, but we're going to go ahead and try and level up here and go for a more complex sleeve shape. There are 3 lines outlining the sleeve pattern for sizes small, medium, and large, and I'm going to be looking at the medium today, which is usually the line in the middle here. I'm going to be starting with this corner on my paper. The rest of the patterns that I've done so far are this way, and the edge of my paper is down this way. So if I start my new pattern right here or so, I have plenty of room to branch outward. Let's take a closer look at the pattern grid itself. You can see here that we are on a 1 centimeter grid with a slightly bolder line every 5 centimeters. We have 3 sleeve sizes on top of each other, so I'm gonna sort of need to pretend that these outer 2 sizes don't exist at the moment. On the computer though, I can literally just make them not exist. Ta-da! Anywho, so my starting point is right here, and unfortunately it's not directly on a grid line, which would have been so much more convenient, so I'm going to have to sort of make my own guidelines. The goal here is to mark down new points in whole centimeter increments, or centimeter and a half isn't too bad. If I go 9 squares up, and then 1 square's width worth over, I can transfer that over to my paper in full sizes, nice round even centimeters. And that is our first line. Returning to the starting point again, it looks like the line continues 1 centimeter over to the left, and then let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines over, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 lines up. So on my own paper, I'm going to make a tiny little 6 centimeter mark over, and then going straight up from that point, I'll do another mark at 55 millimeters, and then I have the next dot on this really kind of absurd connect the dots project I started here. That is pretty much how you do this entire project. You follow the line that you're copying from the book, count up how many centimeters over and up it is from your last working point, mark the new spot, and then just keep going until you've made your whole way around the entire pattern. If you can, I highly recommend printing out a copy of your pattern rather than working directly from the book like I am here. It's so nice to be able to just mark your progress down on the paper as you go so that you don't forget as you're going along exactly which dot or which cross-section of guidelines you were just looking at. You could even print it out a little bit bigger than it is in the book here, which will make seeing all of these little squares so much easier. Okay, so I think I have traced out all of my different bits and pieces. I think. Yes. I have traced out all of the different pieces involved for this this garment, and it's ready to cut out. Now, I have a couple different ways that I could tackle that. If I wanted to, I could add in my seam allowance now in paper, whatever seam allowance I so chose to use, you know, a ½ inch, ¼ inch, full inch. Whatever it is I decided to use, I could go ahead and add that now, but I think I'm going to actually go ahead and leave this one seam allowance list. I feel like a lot of modern pattern making and pattern sewing involves including the seam allowance in your pattern, and then whenever you cut out your paper pattern and put it on your fabric, the lines that you're often marking are the lines that you are going to cut out. And I think instead I'm gonna give it a try to just mark out what I'm going to sew and then eyeball up however much seam allowance I feel like I'm gonna need. I may regret this. We'll see. I think there actually might not be too much left to show in this video. This is mostly what I wanted to do, which is show you guys how I make the pattern bigger. I guarantee there are things I left out, so if you have any questions at all on something that still is a little bit confusing with this process, definitely leave me a comment down below and I'll see if I can address it in the next video. Once I get all of these cut out, I am then going to be doing a mock-up, I think. Alright, well thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful evening and I hope you learned something.